we'll have the Indiana Fever winning in here. Alleviating some of the pressure from Caitlin Clark is going to be huge for this Fever team. Following a post-game review, the league upgrading the initial no call to a flagrant 2, suspending Thomas for 1 game. Every superstar needs someone willing to stand between them and the chaos. For Caitlin Clark, that's Sophie Cunningham. And on June 22nd, the whole league saw exactly why. 6 technical fouls, 2 ejections. Myisha Hines-Allen tossed for shoving Alyssa Thomas. On Monday, her Indiana Fever played the Phoenix Mercury in a game with 6 technical fouls, including 1 for Clark and music and ejection. Their second meeting on Wednesday brought this moment, 10 seconds after defending Clark Cunningham squaring up with Dana Bonner. Clark herself tagged with a technical for clapping and buried under Oliver Wamba record nobody even noticed. It's ridiculous, Clark said afterward, and honestly, she wasn't wrong. This is just the latest chapter in a much bigger story. Let's uncover exactly how it happened. The technical that sparked chaos. The tension did not arrive without warning. Music. Phoenix built an early advantage against Indiana, at one point leading by 16 points. And the Fever spent 3 quarters working their way back into a game that had started to look out of reach. The time is now, though, to get back as you see Harris hit that 3. That's a good start for Stephanie White and the Fever. Harris, Indiana outscored Phoenix 30-11 in the third quarter alone, the stretch that turned the night around and set up everything that followed in the fourth. By the time the fourth quarter arrived, both benches were running hot. Clark and Mercury forward Dana Bonner, a former Fever teammate who had left the organization under circumstances that were at the time described as music controversial, got into a battle for position that turned into words. The officials whistled Clark for a technical foul recorded as being for clapping and instigating. So that was the initial foul, and then we believe a technical was issued on Caitlin Clark. Okay, it was the 5th technical foul of her season. Why does a clap draw the same penalty as a shove or a shouted insult? The rule book does not distinguish between the two once a referee decides a gesture was meant to instigate. And on this night, the whistle went Clark's way, regardless of the size of the gesture that triggered it. Clark did not let the call pass quietly. Speaking to reporters afterward, she did not hold back. It's ridiculous. I got a technical for clapping, she said. Yeah, it's ridiculous. I got a technical for clapping. And so, if so, we should all just go on the calendar now and pick a game that I'm going to be suspended for if I'm going to get technicals for clapping. She went further, arguing the call worked against her own case rather than for it. If any technicals should be taken away, it should be that one. She said, I don't understand it at all. The Bonner exchange did not happen in isolation. Earlier in the same fourth quarter, Fever forward Myisha Hines-Allen and Mercury star Alyssa Thomas had already gotten into their own confrontation, each drawing a technical foul of their own. Is it possible for a single quarter to hold this many separate flashpoints without any of them being the real story on their own? By the time Clark's clap drew a whistle, the fourth quarter had already become less about the 11 points separating the two teams and more about how many separate confrontations both benches could generate before the final horn. None of the 4 players involved in these opening skirmishes had thrown a punch or committed a flagrant act. When a player comes down on a foot, even if it's slightly, it's enough to trigger that flagrant one. Yeah, what they had done was refuse to let a single moment of contact or a single exchange of words go unanswered, a pattern that had been building between these two specific franchises for longer than 1 quarter, and one that the rest of the game would only make more explicit. None of the officials involved that night explained their reasoning beyond music. The label attached to the call itself. Technical fouls rarely come with elaboration in the moment. A referee raises a hand, signals a code, and the broadcast is left in further rest from context and camera angle. On this particular clap, the inference was not difficult. Clark had been drawing with Bonner seconds earlier, and the officiating crew treated the two moments as connected music, rather than separate, folding a gesture into the same read as the words that preceded it. The Bonner angle adds its own layer to the exchange. Bonner had spent parts of the previous season on Indiana's roster before moving to Phoenix under circumstances both sides have described differently in public. A battle for position between two players who once share a locker room music reads differently than the same exchange between strangers, and the broadcast leaned into that history, returned to the two of them repeatedly once the first whistle blew. 10 seconds that changed the game. What came next moved fast enough that the broadcast barely had time to cut between angles. Sophie Cunningham, already known around the league for stepping toward exactly this kind of confrontation rather than away from it, had her own heated exchange with Bonner. Both were assessed technical fouls. Technical because there's two players just battling for position. Oh my! And they're still going now. It's Cunningham and Bonner. Keep in mind, the count for the quarter climbed again. 4 technicals for players. And the fourth quarter still had time left on the clock. Less than 10 seconds later, the sequence reached its breaking point. Hines Allen, still carrying the heat from her earlier exchange with Thomas, shoved her. The contact music was clear enough that officials did not hesitate. A second technical foul and an automatic ejection under WNBA rules. Why does a shove carry an automatic ejection when a clap only carries a technical? The distinction the league draws is physical contact against another player, not the intensity of the moment surrounding it. And Hines Allen shoved crossed that specific line in a way nothing else music that quarter had. Thomas did not retaliate. She walked away from the contact rather than escalating it further, aware that a response in music kind would likely have ended her night as well. Hines Allen left the court having played 14 minutes off the bench, finishing with 3 points, 1 rebound, and 1 assist. Her 15th three-point make of the season. A modest statistical music line attached to the moment that defined the broadcast fourth quarter far more than anything on the scoreboard did. A full quarter's worth of penalties and player ejections compressed into a shove that took less than 10 seconds to develop and resolve. All of it stacked on top of a game Indiana was still trying to close out. Was any single one of these moments taken alone enough to explain what the broadcast turned into that night? Almost certainly not. Stacked together in the same 10-minute stretch, they built a sequence that outlasted the final score and how long it stayed in the conversation afterward. What makes the sequence notable in hindsight is what it revealed about how the Fever's roster had begun operating around Clark specifically. Hines Allen did not shove Thomas over a play that touched her directly. The shove landed in the aftermath of tension that had built around Clark's own exchange with Bonner minutes earlier. An ejection absorbed on behalf of a dispute that had started one possession before Hines Allen was music, even part of it. That kind of response does not happen by accident on a roster, and it does not happen without some level of shared understanding among teammates about what will and will not be tolerated on the floor. Hines Allen shoved cost Indiana her production for the rest of the night. 3 points, 1 rebound, 1 assist across 14 minutes was a full extent of what she contributed before her ejection. A team trying to protect a lead in the fourth quarter does not typically welcome losing a rotation player to an avoidable ejection. Defensive foul called on Hines Allen, followed by the second technical. That's an automatic ejection with the 2 technicals. So unfortunately, my high Indiana absorbed that cost music. Anyway, without visible hesitation from anyone on the bench in the moments immediately after it happened. The broadcast's own cameras told part music of the story on their own. In the seconds after Cunningham's exchange with Bonner, camera operators stayed locked on a confrontation rather than cutting to a wide shot court. And the moment that followed, Cunningham pointing directly at Bonner as the two continued jawing. Music would go on to circulate widely online in the days afterward, detached from the game itself and turn into its own separate story about the gesture rather than the foul that prompted it. Clark's historic night was overlooked. Buried underneath all 6 ejections worth of chaos was one of the stronger statistical nights of Clark's season, and it is worth pulling out from the noise on its own terms. She finished with music, 24 points and 9 assists, both game highs, on 8 of 17 shooting from the field, playing 29 minutes. 3 rebounds rounded out a stat sheet that on a quieter night would have been an entire story on its own. The number that outlasts the box, music. Score is the streak attached to it. With this performance, Clark extended her run of consecutive games with at least 20 points and 5 assists music to 6. At the Olympic break, she's averaging 17 points and 8 assists per game, the longest such streak in NBA history. Does a record like that mean less because it happened inside a game remembered mostly for its technical fouls? If anything, the opposite is true. Clark produced a record while drawing a technical, absorbing a physical, hostile fourth quarter, and watching a teammate get ejected in her own defense. Conditions that would disrupt most players' rhythm entirely. Her post-game comments made clear she did not separate the record from the frustration. She was not speaking from the losing side of a close game, deflecting blame for a defeat. Indiana had won. Clark had set a league record in the very quarter that produced her 5th technical foul of the season, and she chose to spend her post-game availability on the officiating rather than the milestone. Why would a player use her moment at the podium after a win music and a record to focus on a single foul call instead? Because for Clark, that's clearly a foul which was called. The question is, will they call it the two were not separate stories? The technical was, in her own framing, part of a pattern she had been tracking across the season, not an isolated bad call she was willing to let go unremarked. The count of 5 carries its own weight, separate from whether any individual music call was fair. The WNBA suspends a player automatically upon reaching a set threshold within a music season, and every technical counts toward the same way, regardless of size. A shove, an argument with an official, and a clap during a shouting match all register identically once logged. That is closer to what Clark's post-game irritation was actually about. Not wounded pride over one specific music whistle, but a cumulative system that treats a shove and a clap as functionally the same entry music on the same list. None of that changes what the box score already says about the night itself.
Let go unremarked. The count of 5 carries its own weight, separate from whether any individual call was fair. The WNBA suspends a player automatically upon reaching a set threshold within a season, and every technical counts toward it the same way regardless of size. A shove, an argument with an official, and a clap during a shouting match all register identically once logged. That is closer to what Clark's post-game irritation was actually about, not wounded pride over one specific whistle, but a cumulative system that treats a shove and a clap as functionally the same entry on the same list. None of that changes what the box score already says about the night itself. The record does not carry an asterisk for what surrounded it, and nothing about the technical foul total changes what she actually did on the floor across 29 minutes.
And Clark, I think, gets a technical foul, and she does.
Clark's situation was not without recent precedent inside the league, which makes the officiating crew's decision that night harder to read as automatic. Earlier in the season, Dallas guard Paige Buchers had a technical foul rescinded after a broadly similar clapping incident, the league apparently willing in that instance to separate the gesture from any intent to instigate. Whether the WNBA applies that same standard evenly from one broadcast to the next is a separate question from whether any single call, taken alone, was defensible. Does one rescinded technical elsewhere in the season obligate the league to explain why this one stood? Not by rule, but it invites the comparison regardless, and the league had not publicly addressed it by the time this game ended. The comeback everyone forgot. Clark's record-setting night happened inside a broader team performance that deserves its own accounting, separate from the technical fouls that dominated the broadcast. Monique Billings finished with 14 points and 10 rebounds, her first double-double of the season.
Monique, another double-double for your team and for you.
It was a quiet physical contribution on a night when most of the attention went elsewhere, and it came at a point in the season when Indiana needed exactly that kind of production from its front court. Billings had not recorded a double-double at any point this season before that night, which makes the timing worth noting on its own. A front court performance like that, arriving in a game this chaotic, tends to disappear from the recap entirely unless someone goes back through the box score specifically looking for it, which is exactly what happened across most of the coverage that followed this game. The story that traveled was the fourth quarter. The story that decided the game, in large part, was a 10-rebound night from a player who has not always been the first name mentioned in Indiana's rotation. Not every Fever starter had a strong night. Aaliyah Boston finished with 8 points on 2 of 9 shooting, a rough outing by her own standards.
Austin galloping to the cup with an 8-point lead.
Absorbing minutes and defensive assignments without the offensive production that usually accompanies her floor time. Is a role player's off night more or less notable inside a game, defined by technical fouls rather than execution? Less in the moment,